The most deafening sound in the world isn't a scream. It's the silence of a husband's phone going straight to voicemail while his wife bleeds out on a hospital bed. Right now, at 3 a.m., the monitors attached to Madeleine Sterling are screaming that she and her unborn son are dying. But the internet is screaming louder. A photo has just gone viral on TMZ, time-stamped 40 minutes ago. It shows Dominic Sterling, the king of Wall Street, clinking champagne glasses on a private yacht in the Mediterranean, and he's not alone. Resting her hand possessively on his chest is Isabella Rossi, his ex-fiancée. While Madeleine fights for her life in a cold New York trauma room, her husband is celebrating with the woman who vowed to destroy her. But look closer at the photo, because the truth is hidden in his eyes. The rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, turning the panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline into a blurred, weeping mess. Inside, the atmosphere was even more suffocating. Madeleine Sterling clutched the edge of the marble kitchen island, her knuckles white. A sharp, searing pain ripped through her lower abdomen, causing her to double over. She was 34 weeks pregnant. Too early. Far too early. "Breathe, Maddie. Just breathe," whispered Tessa, her younger sister, who was frantically scrolling through her phone with shaking hands. "The ambulance is 3 minutes away. Don't push. For God's sake, don't push." Madeleine gasped, sweat matting her blonde hair to her forehead. Where is he?" Tessa froze. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury. She quickly locked her phone screen, shoving it into her pocket. "Focus on me, Maddie. Dominic. His flight was delayed. You know the storm." "You're a terrible liar, Tess," Madeleine wheezed, another contraction seizing her body, harder this time. It felt like her body was being torn in half. "Give me the phone." "No, you need to stay calm for the baby." "Give me the phone!" Madeleine shrieked, the desperation in her voice cracking into a sob. Reluctantly, Tessa handed it over. The screen was already illuminated with a push notification from the Daily Mail. The headline was bold, cruel, and impossible to misunderstand. "Billionaire Dominic Sterling spotted at Hotel du Cap Eden Rock with Italian heiress Isabella Rossi. Sources say divorce imminent." Below it lay the photograph. It wasn't grainy. It was high definition, undeniable proof. Dominic, the man who had kissed Madeleine's belly just 2 days ago and promised to fly to London for a boring board meeting, was standing on a moonlit terrace in the south of France. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking devastatingly handsome and utterly unbothered. Isabella Rossi, the woman whose name had haunted their marriage like a spectre, was laughing, her lips inches from his ear. Madeleine felt the world tilt. The physical pain of the contraction was nothing compared to the evisceration of her heart. "He promised," Madeleine whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunder outside. "He said he was handling the merger. He said he wanted this family." "He's a monster," Tessa spat, grabbing a cold towel to wipe Madeleine's face. "Forget him. We have to save you and this baby. That's all that matters right now." The elevator doors pinged open, and paramedics rushed in, their neon vests a jarring contrast to the muted beige and gold of the luxury apartment. As they loaded Madeleine onto the stretcher, her blood pressure skyrocketed. The monitors beeped an erratic, terrified rhythm. Preeclampsia, placental abruption. The terms were thrown around by the paramedics in hushed, urgent tones. As they wheeled her out into the stormy New York night, Madeleine gripped her sister's hand. "If I don't make it," she choked out, tears streaming into her ears. "Don't let him have the baby. Promise me, Tess. Don't let him touch my son." "You're going to make it," Tessa cried, running alongside the stretcher. But as the ambulance doors slammed shut, shutting out the rain, Madeleine's vision began to blur. The last thing she saw wasn't her sister's face, but the mental image of Dominic smiling at Isabella while she lay alone in the dark. To understand the brutality of that night, you have to understand the fairy tale that preceded it. Or rather, the carefully constructed illusion of one. Dominic Sterling wasn't just rich. He was old money, combined with new aggression. The Sterling family had owned half of the steel industry in the 1920s and had successfully pivoted to tech and venture capital in the 2000s. Dominic was the crown prince, ruthless, brilliant, and emotionally impenetrable. Madeline was the anomaly. She wasn't a socialite. She was a curator at the Met, a woman of quiet intelligence and grace who had met Dominic at a charity gala 3 years ago. She was wearing a simple vintage dress. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her college tuition. He had pursued her with a relentless intensity that she had mistaken for passion. They married 6 months later. It was the wedding of the decade. Vogue called it the American royal wedding. But there was always Isabella. Isabella Rossi was the daughter of the Italian shipping magnate Giovanni Rossi. She and Dominic had been betrothed since childhood in one of those unspoken high society arrangements that merge empires. Isabella was fire to Madeline's ice. She was loud, manipulative, and stunningly beautiful. When Dominic broke off their unofficial engagement to marry Madeline, Isabella hadn't cried. She had smiled, a slow, predatory smile, and told the press, "Dominic likes his toys. He'll come back to the business when he gets bored." For 2 years, it seemed Isabella was wrong. Dominic was attentive. He shielded Madeline from the paparazzi. He bought her the penthouse. When she got pregnant after a year of trying, he seemed genuinely over the moon. He had even started renovating the nursery himself, assembling the crib with his own hands, swearing off nannies. "I want to be the father my father never was," he had told Madeline one night, his hand resting on her swelling stomach. So what changed? The shift had started 4 weeks ago. Dominic became distant. He started taking calls on his encrypted satellite phone, locking himself in his study for hours. When Madeline asked, he blamed the Kensington merger, a deal involving a massive acquisition of a British biopharmaceutical firm. "It's complicated, Maddie. There are dangerous players involved," he had said, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I need you to trust me. No matter what you hear, trust me. Trust me." Madeline replayed those words in her mind as she lay in the critical care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital. The doctors had performed an emergency C-section. She was alive, but barely. Her blood pressure was still dangerously high, hovering in stroke territory. Her son, born 6 weeks premature, was in the NICU. He weighed only 4 pounds. He was fighting for every breath in an incubator that looked like a spaceship, hooked up to tubes that were thicker than his tiny fingers. Tessa sat by Madeline's bed, her eyes red-rimmed. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery. "Has he called?" Madeline asked, her voice a raspy croak. She didn't have to specify who. Tessa hesitated, then shook her head. "I've called his personal assistant, his lawyer, even the pilot of the company jet." Radio silence. The assistant, a guy named Joyce, finally picked up an hour ago. He said Dominic is indisposed and cannot be disturbed due to sensitive negotiations. Negotiations? Madeline let out a bitter, weak laugh. "Is that what they call sleeping with your ex now?" "The internet is tearing him apart," Tessa said, a vindictive satisfaction in her voice. Stock prices for Sterling Corp dropped 8% this morning. People are burning his merchandise in the streets. Hashfine Dominic is trending, but not in a good way. Everyone knows his wife is dying, and he's missing. Madeline closed her eyes. He knows. He has to know. He has alerts set up for the family. If he's not here, it's because he doesn't want to be. Just then, the door to the private room opened. Madeline flinched, hoping against hope that it would be him, rushing in with disheveled hair and a frantic apology. It wasn't. It was a man in a sharp charcoal suit. He carried a briefcase and wore the weary expression of someone who cleans up expensive messes for a living. It was Arthur Blackwood, the Sterling family's chief attorney. "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice devoid of empathy, "I am relieved to see you are awake." "Where is my husband, Arthur?" Madeline demanded. trying to sit up but falling back against the pillows. "Mr. Sterling is currently unreachable," Arthur said, placing the briefcase on the table. However, he anticipated this situation. He anticipated me almost dying? He anticipated the birth, Arthur corrected smoothly. He clicked the briefcase open. He instructed me to present you with these documents immediately upon the child's delivery. Tessa stood up, blocking the lawyer. "She just had major surgery. She's not signing anything." "She doesn't have to sign," Arthur said, pulling out a thick file stamped with the red wax seal of the Sterling estate. "She just has to read. This is a petition for full custody filed by Dominic Sterling, and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the paternity of the child." The room went dead silent. "Paternity?" Madeline whispered. "What are you talking about? That is his son." Arthur adjusted his glasses. "According to Mr. Sterling, that is highly debatable, and until DNA results are confirmed, he has frozen all assets accessible to you, including the medical insurance covering the NICU." The shock hit Madeline harder than the surgery. "He cut off the NICU. It's a leverage tactic," Tessa screamed, lunging at the lawyer. "You're going to kill that baby. You sick psychos." "Security," Arthur said calmly. 2 guards waited in the hallway. "Tessa, please. I am merely the messenger. Mr. Sterling believes there has been infidelity. He has proof of communication between Mrs. Sterling and a Mr. Lucas Gray." Madeline gasped. Lucas Gray, her college boyfriend. A man she hadn't seen in 10 years, a man who had died in a car accident 3 months ago. "Lucas is dead," Madeline said, her voice shaking. "I sent flowers to his funeral." That was the communication. Dominic knew about it. He comforted me. "Mr. Sterling sees it differently now," Arthur said, placing the papers on the bed. "Sign the NDA admitting to the affair, and he will reinstate the medical funding for the child immediately. If you fight this, the funding remains frozen. You have 24 hours. Arthur turned and walked out, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it would crush their ribs. "He's trying to kill you," Tessa whispered, horrified. "He's trying to frame you to get out of the marriage without losing half his fortune, and he's using the baby as a bargaining chip." Madeline looked at the papers, then she looked at the TV mounted on the wall. The news was playing on mute. It showed new footage from Saint-Tropez. It was a video this time. Dominic and Isabella were walking out of a jewelry store. Isabella was holding up a hand, flashing a massive canary yellow diamond ring, the Sterling family ring, the one Dominic's grandmother had worn, the one he had told Madeline was lost in a vault years ago. Something inside, Madeline snapped. The weeping, heartbroken wife died in that hospital bed. In her place, something cold and sharp was born. "Tessa," Madeline said, her voice dropping an octave. It was steady, terrifyingly steady. "Hand me my bag." "Maddie, what are you doing? He wants a war." Madeline winced as she sat up, ignoring the stitches pulling at her stomach. "He forgot who I was before I was Madeline Sterling. I wasn't just a curator." Madeline took her phone. She didn't dial Dominic. She didn't dial a lawyer. She opened an encrypted app she hadn't used in 5 years. Before she met Dominic, Madeline had a different life. She had worked in forensic accounting for the DOJ. She had quit because the work was too dangerous, tracking cartel money and oligarch assets. She had buried that part of her life to be the perfect wife. "I know where the bodies are buried," Madeline whispered, typing a code into the app. "I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. I know about the shell companies in Panama. I didn't sign a prenup that covered criminal negligence." "Maddie, stop. You're scaring me," Tessa said. "Good," Madeline said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Dominic thinks he's untouchable because he's with Isabella. He thinks he can starve my son to save a few $1 billion. She hit enter. A stream of data began to upload to a secure cloud server. "I'm going to burn the Sterling Empire to the ground," Madeline said, "and I'm going to live stream the ashes." Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away in the south of France. Dominic Sterling stood on the balcony of the Hôtel du Cap Eden Rock. The party was raging inside. Isabella was laughing, the sound grating on his ears like broken glass. He looked down at his phone. He had signal, but he wasn't checking the news. He was watching a live feed. It was a grainy, black-and-white video of a hospital incubator. He could see the tiny chest of his son rising and falling. "Is it done?" Isabella asked, stepping out onto the balcony. She trailed a finger down his tuxedo jacket. Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't look at her. His eyes were glued to the baby. Blackwood delivered the papers. "Good," Isabella purred. "And the wife? Does she hate you yet?" "She despises me," Dominic said, his voice hollow. "Dead. The whole world despises me." "Perfect," Isabella whispered, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "As long as she hates you, she stays away. And if she stays away, she stays alive. You're doing the right thing, Dom. The consortium is watching. If you had flown back, if you had shown you cared, they would have put a bullet in her head and the baby's." Dominic gripped the balcony railing so hard the metal groaned. He had to play the villain. He had to be the monster. He had to destroy his marriage and humiliate his wife publicly to convince the people threatening his family that he didn't care about them. It was the only way to save them. But as he watched the incubator on his screen, Dominic felt a single tear roll down his cheek. He wiped it away instantly. "Let's go back inside," Dominic said, putting on his sunglasses to hide his eyes, even in the dark. "We have a performance to finish." The morning sun that broke over Manhattan the next day didn't bring warmth. It brought a cold, harsh clarity. Inside Mount Sinai Hospital, the mood was frantic. The press had discovered where Madeleine was being treated. Security guards were stationed at every elevator bank, holding back a tide of paparazzi who were hungry for a shot of the discarded wife. Madeleine lay in her bed, the adrenaline of the previous night fading into a dull, throbbing ache in her incision. But her mind was sharper than it had been in years. The weeping victim narrative was over. "Are you sure about this?" Tessa asked, pacing the small room. She held a burner phone that Madeleine had instructed her to buy from a bodega 3 blocks away. "Once you send this, there's no going back. You're declaring war on the father of your child. He declared war when he cut off Leo's life support funding," Madeleine replied, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She reached for the water cup, her hand trembling slightly, not from fear but from physical weakness. "Did you get hold of Jax?" "He's online," Tessa said, handing the phone to Madeleine. "He said he owes you for the cartel case in 18. He's ready when you are." Jax was a ghost, formerly a grey-hat hacker who had turned informant for the DOJ when Madeleine was working there. He could find a needle in a haystack of digital hay. Madeleine typed a quick message into the secure chat. "Phase 1, the charity gala accounts. Leave the heavy stuff for later. Just fire a warning shot." "Copy that, boss," came the reply. Madeleine closed her eyes and waited. She didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, the news cycle shifted violently. On the television, the anchors who had been discussing Dominic's romantic getaway suddenly touched their earpieces, their expressions turning grave. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. "Documents have just been leaked regarding the Sterling Foundation. Allegations suggest that millions of dollars meant for orphanage construction in Brazil were funneled into private, offshore accounts linked to Isabella Ross's family estate." Tessa gasped. "You linked Isabella to the theft?" "Dominic is smart," Madeleine said, staring at the screen. "He wouldn't steal from his own charity. But he let Isabella's father, Giovanni Rossi, sit on the board. I saw the discrepancies months ago, but didn't want to believe it." Dominic covered it up. "Now the world knows he's partying with the woman whose family is embezzling from orphans." The reaction was instantaneous. Social media exploded. The narrative changed from Dominic finds new love to Juan Dominic and Isabella. the Bonnie and Clyde of billionaire fraud. But Madeline wasn't done. "Help me up," she commanded. "Maddie, you can't walk," Tessa protested. "I need to go to the NICU, now." With agonizing slowness, Madeline shuffled down the hallway, leaning heavily on the IV pole and her sister. Every step felt like a knife twisting in her abdomen, but she gritted her teeth, sweating through her gown. When they reached the NICU, the silence was sacred. There, in the dim light, lay Leo. He was so small he looked unreal, his skin translucent. The steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was the only music Madeline wanted to hear. She stood there, her hand pressed against the glass. "They won't hurt you," she whispered to the plastic box. "I won't let them." Suddenly the heavy double doors of the NICU swung open. Arthur Blackwood, the lawyer, strode in, flanked by 2 hospital administrators. "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur hissed. His composure rattled for the first time. "What have you done? The stock is in free fall. The board of directors is calling for an emergency vote." Madeline didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on her son. "I'm just getting started, Arthur." "You are violating the NDA you haven't even signed yet," Arthur barked, forgetting to keep his voice down in the quiet zone. A nurse glared at him. "Mr. Sterling will bury you. He will take this child and put him in a boarding school in Switzerland before he can walk. Revoke the leak. Claim it was a hack. Now." Madeline slowly turned. She looked exhausted, pale, and disheveled, but her eyes burned with a terrifying intensity. "You tell Dominic," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "that if he doesn't reinstate the medical funding for this baby in the next 10 minutes, the next leak won't be about charity money. It will be about the cobalt mines in Congo. It will be about the bribes paid to the senator last July. I have the receipts, Arthur. I have everything." Arthur's face went white. The cobalt deal was a secret that could land Dominic in federal prison for 20 years. "You wouldn't," Arthur whispered. "You'd destroy the inheritance of the child you're trying to save." "Try me," Madeline said. "I'd rather my son be poor and safe than rich and owned by a monster." 10 minutes, Arthur." She turned back to the incubator. 8 minutes later, a nurse rushed in, looking flustered. "Mrs. Sterling, we just received a wire transfer. An anonymous donor covered the entire NICU stay, indefinitely, and they added a security detail for the unit." Tessa grabbed Madeline's arm, squeezing it. "You did it!" Madeline didn't smile. She watched Leo's chest rise and fall. "I bought us time, but Dominic won't forgive this. He's coming for us." The Mediterranean Ocean was a sheet of black glass reflecting the moon, but on the deck of the Lady Isabella, the mood was anything but serene. Dominic Sterling paced the master cabin, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. The leak about the charity funds had caused chaos. His phone was vibrating non-stop, with calls from shareholders, PR crisis teams, and the SEC. "You look tense, amore," Isabella cooed from the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe that left very little to the imagination. She walked over and took the glass from his hand, taking a sip. "My father is not happy about the leak. He thinks your wife is problematic." "She's desperate," Dominic said, his voice flat. "Desperate people do dangerous things. I told you we pushed her too hard with the medical bills." "It was necessary," Isabella shrugged, tracing the line of his jaw. "We have to break her spirit. If she has hope, she fights. If she fights, the consortium sees her as a liability. You know the rules, Dom. You join the family, you cut the dead weight." Dominic turned away, walking to the porthole window. He stared out at the dark water. He wasn't worried about the money. He wasn't even worried about the prison time Madeline threatened him with. He was worried because Madeline had just painted a target on her back. The consortium wasn't just a business group. It was a shadow syndicate that controlled logistics, shipping, and energy across Europe and the Americas. Isabella's father, Giovanni, was a high-ranking member. They had approached Dominic 6 months ago with a simple offer. "Merge your tech empire with our shipping routes, or we dismantle your life. They had proven they could do it. They had rigged the brakes on his car, an accident he narrowly survived. Then they had sent photos of Madeline sleeping in their bed, taken from inside the penthouse. The message was clear. We can get to her any time. To save her, Dominic had to become one of them. He had to marry into the Rossi bloodline and sever all ties with his past. He had to make Madeline hate him so much that she wouldn't look for him, wouldn't try to find the truth. Because if she found the truth, she became a loose end. "I'll handle Madeline," Dominic said, turning back to Isabella. "She's bluffing about the cobalt mines. She doesn't have those files." "Are you sure?" Isabella stepped closer, pressing her body against his. "Because my father thinks she does. He thinks maybe you left them for her to find. Maybe. You're not as committed to us as you say." The air in the cabin grew heavy. This was a test. Dominic looked at Isabella. She was beautiful, yes, but in the way a poisonous snake is beautiful. He forced a cruel smile onto his face. "Your father is an old man who sees ghosts," Dominic said smoothly. He reached out and grabbed Isabella by the waist, pulling her in. It took every ounce of his willpower not to recoil. "I chose you, didn't I? I chose the power. I chose the future. Madeline is just a relic of a boring life." Isabella smiled, her eyes searching his for any sign of deceit. "Prove it," she whispered. "How?" "Make a public statement," she said. "Tomorrow morning, a video press conference. Deny the paternity of the child. Call her unstable, and announce our engagement." Dominic felt his stomach twist. Denying his son. It was the one line he swore he wouldn't cross. "And if I don't?" "Then my father sends a cleaner to New York tonight," Isabella said casually, as if discussing the weather. "New York hospitals are so understaffed. It would be so easy for a machine to malfunction." The threat hung in the air, sharp and bloody. Dominic didn't blink. He couldn't show weakness. He leaned down and kissed Isabella, a hard, possessive kiss that had no love in it, only desperation. "Set up the cameras," he said against her lips. "I'll do it at sunrise." The next morning, 7 a.m. New York time. Madeline was breastfeeding Leo for the first time, a small victory in a sea of nightmares, when Tessa burst into the room, her face pale. "Don't turn on the TV," Tessa said breathlessly. "What is it?" Madeline asked, pulling the blanket closer around Leo. "Just don't." But Madeline already had the remote in her hand. She clicked it on. Dominic was on screen. He looked impeccable, sitting in front of a sunny backdrop of the French Riviera. But his eyes were dead. "Regarding the rumors of my absence," Dominic was saying into the microphone, "I want to be clear. My marriage to Madeline ended months ago in private. We grew apart. As for the child..." He paused. Madeline stopped breathing. "I have significant reasons to believe the child is not mine. I will be seeking a court-ordered DNA test. Until then, I am focusing on my future with a partner who understands the demands of my life. I am happy to announce my engagement to Isabella Rossi." Isabella appeared on screen, flashing a ring that caught the sun. She laughed and kissed his cheek. Madeline felt the room spin. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the public humiliation. He had disowned Leo to the entire world. A sob ripped from her throat, raw and animalistic. She looked down at Leo, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father had just called him a bastard on international television. "He's dead to me," Madeline wept, rocking back and forth. "He's dead to me." But thousands of miles away, as the cameras cut and the live feed ended, Dominic Sterling walked off the set, went into the bathroom of the yacht, locked the door, and vomited into the sink until his ribs ached. He washed his face with ice-cold water, staring at his reflection. "Forgive me, Maddie," he whispered to the mirror. "Please, just forgive me." He pulled a small, disposable phone from a hidden compartment in his shaving kit. He had one chance. He typed a message to a number that didn't exist in any official database. "The engagement is real. The merger is happening. Now call off the dogs in New York. He waited. Dogs are on a leash, the reply came. But if she releases the cobalt files, the leash breaks. Dominic flushed the phone down the toilet. He had bought Madeline's safety, but at the cost of her soul. Now, he had to figure out how to destroy the Rosses from the inside before Madeline destroyed him from the outside. He walked back out onto the deck. Isabella was waiting with a glass of champagne. "To us," she beamed. "To us," Dominic echoed, raising the glass. As he drank, he noticed a man watching him from the upper deck. It was Giovanni Rossi himself, smoking a cigar. The old man didn't smile. He just watched, his eyes like a shark's. Dominic knew then that the test wasn't over. It had only just begun. Back in New York, Madeline wiped her tears. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that scared even Tessa. "Tessa," Madeline said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Call Jax." "Maddie, you heard him. He disowned Leo. Maybe we should just take the settlement and run." "No," Madeline said. She looked at the TV screen where Dominic's frozen image was still smiling. "He wants to play the villain? Fine. I'll show him what a hero looks like when she has nothing left to lose." "What are you going to do?" "He said he wants a DNA test." Madeline pulled the IV out of her arm, blood trickling down her wrist. She didn't flinch. "I'm going to give him one, but I'm going to deliver it personally." "You can't go to France," Tessa cried. "You just had a C-section." "Watch me," Madeline said. "Pack your bags, Tess. We're going to the Riviera." The flight to Nice was a blur of painkillers and turbulence. Madeline sat in the leather seat of the chartered jet, paid for by liquidating her 401k, staring out at the clouds. She wore a corset under her dress, not for fashion, but to bind her surgical incision tight enough to keep her upright. "You're burning up," Tessa said, checking Madeline's temperature for the 10th time. "Maddie, this is suicide. You are walking into a party hosted by the Italian mafia, essentially, to confront a man who just told the world he hates you." "He doesn't hate me," Madeline said, her voice faint, but conviction hardened. "He's erasing me. There's a difference, and I need to know why." They landed in Nice at sunset. The air smelled of salt and expensive perfume. The engagement party was being held that very night at the Villa Efrussi de Rothschild, a palatial estate overlooking the sea. It was a masquerade ball, Isabella's idea of a joke, hiding faces while revealing scandals. Madeline didn't have an invitation. She didn't need one. She was the rightful Mrs. Sterling. She dressed in a gown of midnight blue velvet, high-necked and long-sleeved, hiding the bruising on her arms from the IVs. She wore a silver mask that covered the upper half of her face. She looked like a queen in mourning. "Stay in the car with the engine running," Madeline told Tessa and the hired driver. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call the French police and upload the files." Madeline walked up the long stone steps of the villa. Security stopped her. But when she lowered her mask for a split second, the head guard, a man who had worked for Dominic for years, paled. He stepped aside, letting her pass. Loyalty, it seemed, hadn't completely died. The ballroom was a sea of gold and red. A string quartet played a haunting waltz. Laughter tinkled like broken glass. In the center of the room, under a crystal chandelier, stood Dominic and Isabella. Dominic wore a black mask, but Madeline knew the set of his shoulders, the way he held his drink, tight, like a weapon. Isabella was draped in scarlet silk, a diamond choker around her neck that cost more than Madeline's life insurance. Madeline took a breath, fighting the dizziness, and walked into the center of the room. The crowd parted. The music faltered and died. "Dominic," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the silent hall. Dominic froze. He turned slowly. Through the eye holes of his mask, Madeline saw a flash of sheer, unadulterated terror. Not for himself, but for her. "Madeline," he said, his voice ice cold, "I didn't think you'd be foolish enough to come." You forgot something in New York, Madeline said, reaching into a clutch. She pulled out a crumpled envelope. The DNA results, 99.9% match. He is your son, Dominic, and you are going to look at this paper and tell me to my face that you abandon him. Isabella laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. She stepped forward, linking her arm through Dominic's. Oh, honey, you really are pathetic. Do you think a piece of paper changes anything? Dom doesn't want the baggage. He wants a dynasty. I'm talking to my husband, Madeline snapped, her eyes locking onto Dominic's. Tell me, Dom. Tell me you don't love him. Look me in the eye. The tension in the room was suffocating. Giovanni Rossi, standing in the shadows with his guards, moved his hand toward his jacket pocket. Dominic saw the movement. He knew he had seconds before Giovanni ordered a hit right there on the marble floor. He had to be brutal. He had to break her heart to save her life. Dominic took the envelope from Madeline's hand. He didn't open it. He held it up to the flame of a nearby candle. The paper caught fire. The crowd gasped. I have no son, Dominic said, his voice devoid of humanity. He dropped the burning paper to the floor and crushed the ashes with his dress shoe. And I have no wife. You are trespassing, Miss Sterling. Security. Madeline stood there, the ashes smouldering at her feet. The physical pain in her abdomen was nothing compared to the void opening in her chest. He had burned the proof of their child's existence. Two large guards grabbed Madeline's arms. Get off me! She screamed, struggling. Dominic stepped closer, his face inches from hers. To the room, it looked like intimidation. Go back to New York, Madeline, he hissed, grabbing her wrist painfully hard. If you ever come near me or Isabella again, I will destroy you. But as he shoved her backward toward the guards, his thumb pressed hard into the soft skin of her palm. He slipped something small and cold into her hand. Get her out of here, Dominic roared, turning his back on her. Now! Madeline was dragged out, screaming his name. She was thrown down the front steps of the villa, landing hard on the gravel. Her knees bled, her stitches burned. Tessa ran from the car, helping her up. Maddie, oh my God, are you okay? I told you he's a monster. Madeline was sobbing, gasping for air. But her right hand was clenched tight. She opened her fist. Sitting in her palm was a small, ornate key. It wasn't a house key. It was an old-fashioned iron key with a small tag attached. On the tag, written in Dominic's distinctive, jagged handwriting, was a single word. Sanctuary. Madeline stopped crying. She stared at the key. The sanctuary wasn't a place. It was the name of the vintage sailboat Dominic's grandfather had restored. The one Dominic kept in a private, forgotten marina down the coast. A place he swore Isabella and the corporate world didn't know about. He didn't burn the results, Madeline whispered, a realization dawning on her. He burned the copy. He kept the original. What? Tessa asked, confused. Get in the car, Madeline commanded, wiping the blood from her knees. We aren't going to the airport. We're going to the marina. The drive to the old marina took 40 minutes. The coastline was dark, the winding roads treacherous. Madeline sat in the back, clutching the key. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was returning with a vengeance. She was pale, her forehead slick with sweat. Maddie, you need a hospital, Tessa pleaded. You're bleeding through the dress. I need answers, Madeline gritted out. They pulled up to the rusted gate of the Le Vieux Port. It was a graveyard for boats, forgotten yachts and fishing trawlers. At the end of the darkest pier, bobbing silently in the water, was the sanctuary. It was a modest wooden sailboat, starkly different from the mega-yacht Dominic was currently partying on. Madeline limped down the pier. Her hand shook as she fit the key into the cabin lock. It clicked. The cabin smelled of old wood, sea salt, and Dominic's cologne. It was recently cleaned. Look, Tessa whispered, pointing to the small table in the center of the cabin. There was a laptop, a satellite phone, and a thick leather binder. Madeline sat down heavily, opening the binder. The first page made her gasp. It was a dossier. Photos of Giovanni Rossi, Isabella, and most terrifyingly, Arthur Blackwood, the family lawyer. There were bank transfer records, surveillance photos of arms deals, and transcripts of encrypted calls. "It's not just a merger," Madeline read, her eyes scanning the pages frantically. "It's a hostile takeover. The Rossi family has been blackmailing Dominic for months. They threatened to kill us." She flipped the page. There was a photo of Madeline walking into the Met 3 months ago. A red crosshair was drawn over her chest. Underneath, in Dominic's handwriting, "Target marked. Had to agree to terms to remove bounty." "He didn't leave me," Madeline choked out, tears streaming down her face again. This time they were tears of relief and horror. He joined them to stop them from killing me. The affair, the coldness, the cruelty, it was a performance. He had to make them believe he didn't care, so they wouldn't use me as leverage. "And the baby?" Tessa asked, her voice trembling. "If he acknowledged the baby," Madeline said, "the baby becomes a target too. By denying Leo, he made him worthless to the kidnappers." Suddenly the laptop on the table pinged. A video file opened automatically. It was a recording made 2 days ago. Dominic appeared on the screen. He looked wrecked, eyes dark, stubble on his chin, sitting in this very cabin. "Maddie," the video Dominic said, "if you are watching this, it means I failed to make you hate me enough to stay away. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I couldn't tell you the truth because Arthur Blackwood is the mole. He reports everything to Rossi. If you knew, you'd react, and they would see it." Dominic took a deep breath on the screen. "Tomorrow is the wedding. It's not a wedding. It's a signing ceremony. Once I sign the papers, Rossi gets control of the Sterling algorithm, the software that controls the US power grid logistics. That's what they want. Once they have it, they're going to kill me. They've rigged the yacht to explode during the honeymoon." Madeline covered her mouth to stifle a scream. "I have a plan to stop them, but I can't do it alone. I need the encryption key that I hid in the one place nobody would look. It's in Leo's nursery, Maddie, inside the music box I built. The code is the date we met." The video flickered. "I love you. I have always loved you. Take the evidence in this binder to the Interpol agent listed on the last page. Do not trust the local police. Run, Maddie. Run and live." The screen went black. Madeline sat in silence for a heartbeat. The boat rocked gently. "He's going to die," Tessa whispered. "He's going to let them kill him to keep the algorithm safe." "No," Madeline said. She stood up. The pain in her body was gone, replaced by a cold, burning fury. "He protected us for 6 months alone. Now it's my turn. Maddie, the nursery is in New York. We're in France. We can't get the key in time." Madeline grabbed the satellite phone. "We don't need to go to New York. I know the song the music box plays, and I know the date we met." She dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" "Jax," Madeline said. "We're going to crash a wedding." The next day, the wedding day. The sun rose over the French Riviera like a blood orange. The preparation for the wedding of the century was underway at the Rossi estate. Helicopters circled overhead. Security was tighter than the G20 summit. Dominic stood in his suite, buttoning his tuxedo. He felt like a man walking to the gallows. He had signed the preliminary papers. The final transfer would happen at the altar, broadcast live to the world to ensure legitimacy. Once he said, "I do," the transfer would execute, and then he would be disposable. The door opened. Giovanni Rossi walked in, smiling like a shark who smells blood. "You look handsome, my boy," Giovanni said, clapping a heavy hand on Dominic's shoulder. "Isabella is very excited. She has ordered a special celebratory firework for tonight." "I bet she has," Dominic said dryly. "You seem nervous," Giovanni said, his eyes narrowing. "You aren't having second thoughts about the wife, the one we had to chase off yesterday?" "She's history," Dominic said. "I burned the bridge." "Good, because if she shows up today," Giovanni whispered, leaning in close, "I won't just throw her out. I'll peel her skin off." Dominic clenched his jaw so hard his teeth nearly cracked. She won't show. Meanwhile, on a cliff overlooking the estate, Madeline lay on her stomach in the tall grass, peering through high-powered binoculars. She was wearing tactical gear she had bought from a surplus store, black cargo pants and a fitted jacket. Her blonde hair was tied back. Beside her lay Jax, who had flown in from London overnight, and a man named Hunry, the Interpol contact Dominic had mentioned. "We have a problem," Jax said, typing furiously on a ruggedized laptop. "The estate is using a military-grade signal jammer. I can't hack the sound system or the screens from here. I can't stop the broadcast." "We don't need to hack the screens," Madeline said, lowering the binoculars. "We need to hack the algorithm." "I can't do that unless I'm on their internal network," Jax said. "I need to be within 50 feet of the server room, which is inside the wine cellar, surrounded by 50 armed guards." Madeline looked at the estate. It was a fortress. "I can get you in," Madeline said. "How?" Henri, the Interpol agent, asked. "You're the most wanted woman on their list right now." Madeline turned to look at them. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "Because they think I'm a broken, scorned wife. They don't know I used to hunt cartels for a living. And they certainly don't expect a pregnant woman who just had surgery to rappel down an elevator shaft." "You're joking," Tessa said from the back of the van. "Dominic is waiting for a signal," Madeline said. "He thinks he has to sacrifice himself. I need to let him know I'm here." "How?" Madeline picked up a sleek, black drone sitting in the van. She taped a small object to it. It was the charred remains of the DNA test Dominic had burned. "Jax, can you fly this onto the balcony where Dominic is waiting?" "Easy. Do it," Madeline ordered. "And once he sees it, the real show begins." The drone buzzed to life, lifting into the azure sky. Madeline watched it go. "Hold on, Dom," she thought. "The cavalry is coming, and she's really, really pissed off." The music swelled, a triumphant orchestral piece that signaled the bride's entrance. Isabella walked down the aisle, a vision in white lace, though her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Hundreds of guests, CEOs, politicians, and crime bosses, masking as legitimate businessmen, watched with bated breath. At the altar, Dominic stood motionless. He looked out at the ocean, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was ready to die. He just hoped the explosion would be quick. Then he heard a faint, whirring sound. He glanced up. Hovering just above the balcony railing, unnoticed by the crowd, was the small black drone. Hanging from it was a piece of charred paper. Dominic squinted. It was the DNA test he had burned. A shock wave went through him. "She's here." "Do you?" the officiant began, his voice booming over the speakers. "Isabella Rossi, take this man." "I do," Isabella said, her voice dripping with triumph. She squeezed Dominic's hand, her nails digging into his palm. "Sign the transfer, Dom. Then you can kiss the bride." An aide stepped forward with a tablet, the transfer of the Sterling algorithm. Dominic took the stylus. He looked at Giovanni Rossi in the front row, who nodded slowly, his hand resting near his holster. Dominic pressed the stylus to the screen. "Actually," Dominic said, his voice amplified by the microphone, suddenly steady and cold, "there's been a change of plans." Isabella froze. "What are you doing?" "I'm not signing over the algorithm," Dominic said, looking directly into the camera lens. "I'm uploading the virus." "Cut the feed!" Giovanni roared, jumping to his feet. But it was too late. Suddenly, every screen at the wedding, the giant LED displays, the guests' phones, the tablet, turned bright red. A skull and crossbones appeared, followed by a stream of documents, the Rossi Syndicate, human trafficking logs, arms deal ledgers, the assassination order for Madeline Sterling. "What is this?" Isabella shrieked, clawing at Dominic. "It's over, Bella," Dominic said, grabbing her wrists and shoving her away. "My wife sends her regards." "Kill him!" Giovanni screamed. "Kill them all!" Guards drew their weapons, but before they could fire, the stained glass windows of the villa shattered inward. Rappelling lines dropped from the ceiling. Interpol agents in tactical gear swung into the room, weapons trained. "Federal agents, Drop your weapons! Amidst the chaos, Giovanni Rossi pulled a silver pistol and aimed it squarely at Dominic's chest. "If I go down, you die!" Bang! The gunshot echoed, deafeningly loud. Dominic flinched, waiting for the pain. But he didn't fall. Giovanni Rossi dropped his gun, clutching his shoulder, howling in pain. Dominic turned. Standing in the archway of the server room entrance, smoke curling from the barrel of a stolen guard's pistol, was Madeleine. She was disheveled, bleeding through her dress, and looked like an avenging angel. "Nobody touches my husband," she panted, her voice raw. Dominic ran to her, catching her just as her legs gave out. He fell to his knees, pulling her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. "You came!" he sobbed, the billionaire facade shattering completely. "You crazy, stubborn woman! You came!" "You built the music box," she whispered, clutching his lapels. "I knew you'd never leave us." As Interpol cuffed Isabella and Giovanni, dragging them away, screaming, Dominic kissed Madeleine, a kiss of relief, of terror, and of absolute, undying love. "Let's go home," Dominic whispered. "Our son is waiting." And that is the story of how Madeleine and Dominic Sterling survived the ultimate test. They didn't just survive the Rossi crime family. They survived the silence, the lies, and the betrayal. 3 months later, the headlines had changed. The scandal was gone, replaced by a photo of a quiet christening in a small church in upstate New York. Dominic Sterling had stepped down as CEO to focus on family logistics, while Madeleine returned to the Met, this time with a dedicated security detail that she hand-picked. But the most important thing wasn't the billions of dollars or the corporate empire. It was the moment late at night, in the nursery, when Dominic would hold baby Leo, rocking him to sleep to the tune of a handmade music box. He would look at Madeleine, asleep in the armchair, and know that he was the richest man in the world, not because of what he owned, but because of who he hadn't lost. Sometimes, true love isn't about soft words and easy days. Sometimes it's about burning the world down to keep each other safe. So what do you think? Would you have been able to see through Dominic's lies, or would you have signed the divorce papers? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, please smash that like button, share this with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe to the channel for more twisted tales of love and betrayal. Until next time.
I mean, they've been trying to cancel me for about 15 years, and they've always failed. And often the people trying to cancel me have been other comedians writing for the posh papers, doing that thing they always say, he's punching down. Well, comedy should punch up. We only punch up. We punch up. Their idea of punching up, they have a go at Boris Johnson. How the fuck is that punching up? You know, the cunt is learning disabled. He's like this fucking waterlogged Gary Busey, fucking albino Eggman thing. He can't string a sentence together. Have you heard him talk? He's like, he's a fucking moron. I punch up. I have a go at people like, I don't know, Stephen Hawking, right? Yes, the greatest brain that's ever lived. He can take it. And he wouldn't even have minded when he was alive, because he's part robot, isn't he? I think he's basically a talking chair, so you can say what you want. And he was on Epstein's Island, apparently, so fuck him. I don't... What was he doing there? Why do I want to go? Why? Why do I? You're not just there doing fuck. I would go, what? I know pedos who'd kill for a ticket to that. And he's just taking up a space. It's probably DEI or something. And they go, we need one. Like, I'll go, what are you doing here, Steve? He go, I'm thinking weird shit. Fuck off. That is probably a hate crime. That is. It's a bit like Eddie Redmayne got in trouble when he played Stephen Hawking in the biopic, The Life Story of Stephen Hawking, right? Won an Oscar for it, and that's when the backlash started. People going, no, it should be played by a real disabled creature, all this, right? And they're going, The actor should have the same disability as the person they're portraying. But it was the life story of Stephen Hawking, right? So for the first part of the film, the cunt could walk, right? So I put it to you, what is easier? Getting an actor who can walk, pretend he can't, for the last bit of the film, or get an actor who can't walk, pretend he can for the first bit? How would that even fucking work? Puppetry, think. You can't always find an actor with the same disability as the person they're portraying. They're fucking actors. What if they did a biopic of Helen Keller, the deaf, dumb and blind girl? Well, what's the chances of finding a deaf, dumb and blind actress who can play that role? And if you did, you go right into the director and go, we found a deaf, dumb and blind girl. What did she say? She didn't even answer the fucking phone. Oh, don't get me started. Oh.